into L&D, the ongoing series where we explore the journeys of professionals who have transitioned into the dynamic field of the learning and development from various backgrounds. I'm your host, Inna Horvat, the learning strategist at Aly, and today I'm especially thrilled to host this conversation because our guest is Anser Aly, Head of Global Learning and Leadership Development Center at Unilever, a Fortune 500 marketing practitioner, and a seasoned coach and corporate trainer with 25 years of international experience. Anser's remarkable journey has seen him lead billion-dollar brands at Unilever, where he was instrumental in driving marketing training and capability building transformations across Europe, Middle East, Asia, and Australia. In this episode, we'll explore Anser's transition from marketing into L&D, his expertise in applying marketing techniques to learning strategies, and how organizations can support career growth across various fields. Hi, Anser. It's lovely to see you today.
Hi, Anna. It's a pleasure to be here.
So normally we start from rapid fire questions. This is the same set of questions that we ask each and every guest of ours and summarize the answers by the end of the season. So are you ready to start with that?
Absolutely. Please fire on.
Brilliant. So first things first, what book or a resource can you recommend on L&D or in general educational topics?
Nice. It's a great opening question. I think my choice, the first book that comes to mind, is probably an unconventional one, but I'll say it nonetheless. It's Sapiens by Yuval Harari. And the reason I mentioned that book, I think it's the mother of all books. And forget L&D, just to really understand ourselves as a species, where we started from, how we were hunter-gatherers, and then we learned to form ourselves in groups and tribes and societies shaped, and how storytelling had a role to play. It's such a great book to read. I would strongly recommend it to anyone who hasn't. I think most people in my generation have, but maybe some of the Gen Alphas might not have, because it gives you a very clear understanding of us as a species before you go about learning more around L&D and how to design learning interventions for us.
Brilliant recommendations. It's a definitely handbook for me. I love it, to say the least, and we haven't had it yet, so thank you for that. Next question. Who do you recommend following and inviting to this podcast from L&D or educational experts?
Maybe I'll give another unconventional answer. So look, I absolutely trust your judgment on whom to invite from the more, I think, people who are experts in L&D in today. But I think it'll be a fun episode if you thought of perhaps using technology to access some of the historic figures like Aristotle, Socrates, some giants of learning, or other well-known experts of yesteryears like Henry Ford, who can teach us a lot about innovation. I think you can use AI today to really see what kind of responses would any of them give to your questions. It's something we couldn't do just a few years ago. So I think it might be a fun thing to try out in one of your episodes.
Absolutely. That's really insightful. Next thing, can you share a memorable failure or a setback in your L&D journey, and how did you overcome it? Maybe some lessons drawn.
So failures are always difficult to talk about. The first thing that comes to mind is actually, it takes me back several years to the very first course that I ever designed and was about to deliver, and it almost didn't happen. The reason I say that is I didn't even consider myself as an L&D person at that time. I was a marketer who was passionate about learning. So I had designed a course. I still remember it was called Future Ready Marketing. And I was going to deliver it in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And I almost didn't do it simply because the organizer called me a week before saying that we don't have the exact number of participants that he had promised. They were expecting around 25 participants, and he said, look, I've only had 14 registrations. I'm okay to go along if you are too. And maybe I was a bit too snobbish and arrogant at the time. And I said, hey, I'm not flying all the way to Kuala Lumpur just for 14 participants. So I actually said no. And had I stopped there, I would have never even started on my L&D journey, what eventually became my L&D journey. And my father, bless him, I happen to call him every day. He lives in Pakistan. And he asked me, hey, how's that course going? And I said, it's not happening anymore. And he said, don't be a fool. Why does it matter whether it's 14 people or 24 people? Make sure you go. Now, I didn't really like his advice at the time, but I always respectfully took his advice. And I'm so glad today, it's almost 9 years since, that I said yes. I called back the organizer and I said, look, if it's still okay, it's fine. Let's just go ahead. As it happened, a week later, by the time I landed in Kuala Lumpur, they got 17 participants, so a little bit more than 14. But the amazing thing is I got all the learnings that I needed in that session from those 17 people. So the big learning was don't worry about numbers, but just get started. Because had I just stopped the journey there, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have tried again, thinking that, my courses are not even attracting enough people to run my first course. But that was just the beginning of a very long journey. And I'm very glad that I took my father's advice and I didn't look at the numbers, and I just went ahead and did the course. And I got great feedback, which was obviously very encouraging, and some areas that needed to be improved.
Thank you for this honest and sincere answer. I think that in the end of the day, when we turn back at our own journeys and take a look at all the times that we could have said no, but we said yes, we are grateful that we did. So next, what question must be asked on a job interview for an L&D specialist?
Nice. I think very simply, why L&D? Essentially asking about what motivates them. Because end of the day, what you want to really suss out in the interview is that are they passionate, and are they passionate about the end outcome? Because as long as you are excited about the end goal, the challenges along the way don't matter. And to just give you an example, as a marketer, I was always excited about finally seeing my product on shelf, something that I'd spent months and months on designing, researching, working with cross-functional teams. Finally seeing it on shelf made it all worth it. And similarly in L&D, it's all about actually upskilling others, and through that ensuring that the business meets its goals. And that's a lot harder to get excited about compared to seeing something you have designed on shelf, because it's so intangible and not easy to quantify. So therefore, understanding why L&D and what motivates them, I think would be a key question, at least for me, if I'm interviewing someone.
We're going to talk about parallels between marketing and L&D a little bit later, which I'm super excited about. But currently, we are summarizing our rapid fire questions with the final one. If you had to give just one piece of advice who is starting their career in L&D, what would that be?
One piece of advice, maybe two. The first one is learner first, and then second is measurement. What I mean by learner first is always keep the end user in mind at every stage. So essentially design for the learner. And how to do that, because I know it's easier said than done, try to live a day of your learner's life. Try to really put yourself under their skin, put yourself in their shoes, ideally spend time with them, ask them questions, understand their challenges, and try to live a day of their life as close as possible, because then you can only put the learner first and design something that works for them. And the second one would be around measurement, because for any program that you're designing, you need to really define upfront what success looks like, and then work backwards from there. So learner first and measurement.
Brilliant. Moving on to the main podcast questions that we have promised to our audience. And of course, anyone who is going to visit the LinkedIn page of yours is going to be stunned by your achievements in marketing field. So how do you decide to transition from a marketing manager, an award-winning marketing manager, to becoming a head of the Learning and Leadership Center at Unilever? So could you walk us through your journey a little bit?
Absolutely. Happy to share my story. So just a bit of context for your audience before I dive into the story. I've been a lifelong marketer, and I've had the privilege of working on some fantastic brands in numerous countries, continents, categories, and some really big billion-dollar brands, some that were already big and some that actually hit that mark while I happened to be working on them, which you can imagine is such a massive milestone for any marketer. And therefore, I was having a very fascinating and, dare I say, a very fulfilling marketing career. So it was very unusual that after a lifetime in marketing, I decided to call it quits and pivot my career and shift lanes into L&D. And I think there were two pivotal moments that led to this. One was more recently, the day I actually decided to quit marketing and get into L&D full time. That was just recently, last year. But what led to that was a very long journey, and it took about 8 or 9 years to get to that point. And it got triggered by one specific day, rather one specific learning workshop that got me started. And it's a beautiful program at Unilever that we call Discover Your Purpose. I took that workshop, and the workshop starts with a quote, which I can never forget. It still gives me goosebumps to this day, which is the two most important days of your life are the day you are born and the day you discover why. And that was truly a day 9 years ago that I discovered my why. And what that gives you is clarity on why do I exist. And that triggered me to then get started on trying to live my purpose or try and at least experience it. So what really happened after that day was that see, if it's a lot easier if you hate your day job, you can quit and you can start anything new. I was having a lot of fun, and even to this day, there are brands that I find very aspirational, and I wish that I could have worked on them as a marketer. I think one lifetime and one career isn't enough. But what the Discover Your Purpose workshop did was that it got me started to what I call parallel track. Parallel track as marketer by day, but as coach, consultant, mentor, facilitator, speaker, guest lecturer by evening. So I was sort of parallel tracking, holding my day job as a marketer, but experiencing all of these different roles in the evenings and in my spare time and on weekends. And I think if you ask me, what that really did was that long journey of 7 or 8 years of trying my hand at all those different roles. After that first spark of clarity that the workshop gave me, these different experiences gave me the conviction and the courage to then take that big decision and to decide that I'm going to move into L&D full time. And if you ask me what were the key lessons along the way, I think the biggest one would be, it's a quote that I love, think big, but start small. And that's essentially what I did. Because if you can't, and I would go to the extent of saying, not only start small, but if you can't find the opportunities, then create them. So that's essentially what I did at the time. I started my own side hustle. I founded the Growth Labs, which is actually a platform for like-minded professionals who are keen to give back, and who really bought into the practitioner lens to solving business problems. In fact, these were people that I got together who took a lot of pride in the fact that we are not theorists, we are not academics, we are not full-time trainers. Rather, we are people who have regular daytime jobs and who understand business challenges and are able to therefore provide very practical solutions. And that journey took me to L&D full-time, but it didn't come easy. It didn't come overnight. It came after I visited at least top 5 business schools as a guest lecturer, including Harvard. It came after I designed and delivered at least 150 courses at General Assembly and many other platforms over the last several years. After I facilitated probably at least 25 workshops, if not more. After I spoke in many conferences and forums in at least 4 continents. After I mentored perhaps 20 startup founders, and after I coached several CXOs. So all those different experiences gave me the necessary foundation to take that very difficult decision of a career that I was already very much enjoying, but then finding something that I now love even more.
Thank you for this, sharing your journey. It sounds extremely inspirational, but you see how much work have you spent for the last 9 years. But I would like to come back to the point of Spark that you mentioned, the webinar that Unilever has organized. And I can understand why is it important for a person to discover their own desires, their own potential for growth. However, within one organization, this is highly unusual to hear that organizations encourage their employees to try something new, to change the field. So could we talk a little bit about this, and why would that be beneficial for companies in the first place to take part in such initiatives and to arrange them?
It's a great question, Ina, and I really look up to our leaders, very visionary leaders more than a decade ago, who supported scaling this workshop across the organization. Because at the very start, it was limited to the very senior Unilever executives and directors at the very top, reporting into the CEO. And it was after a few years of very successfully getting some fantastic feedback from everyone and the energy that all participants felt after the workshop that we decided to scale it, and we took it global. And to date, more than nearly 60,000 Unilever employees have taken this workshop. It actually has very little to do with Unilever, but it has everything to do with the participant. And now over the years, we all had a hunch, but now we've conducted research that actually proves that there's a direct link between individual purpose or personal purpose and business performance. Because what really happens, it's a truly magical experience where you go through the workshop, you discover your personal spark, you discover your personal fountain of energy. And once you're clear on that, the next step is to see how you can start living it, and whether your role or your position in the company can allow you to live a part of it. And effectively what it does 9 out of 10 times, Ina, that it removes that dissonance that a lot of us have between work and life. There's always this, no matter how charged up you are, you feel this little bit of guilt, thinking that, oh gosh, another working day and what am I ignoring? But there's a light bulb moment when you realize I can actually live my purpose through a lot of the work that my business and my company is doing. And there's a clear alignment of values. Like as a marketer, I felt that a lot of innovations that I was designing was improving millions of consumers' lives in so many countries. So it's actually very uplifting and very, very energizing. So now we've done a lot of research. There's a lot of data to back up and a lot of evidence to show that helping employees find their individual purpose unleashes a lot of energy, which has a direct link to business productivity, business performance, employees' intrinsic motivation, their speed and agility, and teamwork and cohesion. So it's a win-win, both for the organization, it's a win-win for the individual. And who was to say, that after all those years, I did that workshop 8 or 9 years ago, when I came in this role, now I'm the global lead on employee purpose. I'm the one leading these workshops and taking them further. And we're very open to sharing more about this with anyone who feels that they can benefit. So yeah, it's been a fantastic journey. I myself can be a perfect poster boy for this workshop, if I may say so. But now I'm really thrilled that I'm the one who's actually continuing and carrying the baton forward for this workshop, which still continues to this day at Unilever.
Brilliant. And if any of you listeners thinking that, hey, this is the job of L&D, we should be doing this, helping finding people their purpose. So then if you're thinking this, then you're definitely right. So let's cover briefly a role of L&D in this aspect. So is there anything that we can contribute and try to take a closer look into in respect of your story and the agenda and the initiatives of Unilever?
Absolutely. I think my story is very typical, and a lot of people often at some stage in their career are asking themselves very basic but existential questions of who am I? Why am I? Why am I here doing this? And that's the time where something like this workshop is a fantastic experience. And as L&D professionals, I think we owe it to our organizations, we owe it to our colleagues to be able to offer them interventions like this, because it allows us to really bring our whole self to work. You can't just divorce yourself and leave your true self outside the office gates and then walk in. And we've seen the impact that this workshop has, or other initiatives like this, where you allow employees to search what holds meaning to them, what are their true values, and then they really double down and do so much more that they wouldn't do otherwise. So I'm very happy to connect with any of your listeners also, if they're more curious, if they want to find out more, if they want to understand how this could work in their context for their companies. But I think we've really uncovered a gem. here, which works in our context. And especially today, if you think about all the uncertainty that's around us, all the chaos, all the change that we are experiencing, so much more, that's where purpose becomes even more important. Because when there's change and a lot of uncertainty around you, purpose becomes your anchor. That becomes something that keeps you afloat.
Absolutely. And I'm also I'm a huge fan of the idea that one person can be many things. There is a wonderful psychologist, Gabor Mate, that talks a lot about this aspect, and he talks about the danger of defining a person to just one way. We could be many things, and especially when it comes to L&D, you could be many roles. It's not just facilitator's role, instructional designer, and so on. And once we had a conversation with you, you mentioned something that really hooked me. You mentioned, I know, 9 ways to start within the L&D, and I think that everyone should try this out. So could you elaborate this? What are the 9 ways, and why should everyone from seasoned experts to starters go ahead and just try them out?
See, the 9 ways, very simply, could be 9 different functions, and no matter which function you're in, you could find a way or a reason to get into L&D. And the reason I say that is I honestly believe, now having done this role officially for a fair bit of time, and also unofficially when I was parallel tracking for so long, that it should be a must-have pit stop for anyone and everyone in the corporate world. You could be a structural engineer, you could be an auditor or a finance person, you could be in marketing like I was. But what L&D allows you to do is to really give you an insight into the organization, into the people, and it gives you almost a crystal ball. You've often heard, right, people complaining, if only I had a crystal ball that I can look into and see the future. L&D is almost like a crystal ball because it gives you a bird's eye view of where the gaps are in the organization, where the skill gaps are, how people are feeling, and therefore you can almost predict in the next few years where the organization is going to end up. And therefore, I think a brief stint, no matter how brief, in my case, of course, I've decided to do this full time, but will really help anyone in their career because A, they get to learn a lot of leadership tricks. They learn a lot of how humans and how adults learn and how to inspire people and how to get them to do what you want them to do. Because learning is all about designing interventions, curating experiences in a manner that others learn in the flow of their work. So therefore, I feel that there could be umpteen ways of getting into L&D, but your path, your reason could be very unique. But if you see the value in doing so, it will give you a great insight in your people, in your function, and a very fantastic bird's eye view of all other functions, which maybe you're not typically exposed to. And the beautiful thing is that an L&D is almost like a buddy, a confidant. Everybody's ready to open up to L&D partner and say, look, they're very open to sharing their vulnerabilities. I would never in a million years share with my sales partner where me or my team in marketing feels a little exposed or feels a little weak. But with my L&D partner, that's the first thing I come up with. And I say, can you help us? These are areas where I think the team could do a bit of upskilling. So it's a great way to really put your hand on the pulse of the organization. And I would highly recommend it to anyone and everyone.
Brilliant. Is there any area that you think is the most resultative in terms of bringing the benefit for the businesses?
Absolutely. If you had to choose one, then I would say the very early part of the process, which is all about doing a skills survey and understanding, defining, first of all, for every function and every role and every seniority level, what are the top skills that would be required. And you do that very dispassionately, not thinking of the people that you know, but keeping in mind the context and the role. And then deciding, okay, if that's the skill set, actually giving it numbers, making it very tangible and saying, where would I rate employees today, or where would their leaders rate their teams today? And that I feel is a very revealing exercise because A, it forces you to think that in today's day and age, what are the top 3 skills? Because it's hard to pin them down to 3. And then to really understand, okay, if that is the case, where are we on that? And that exercise would be helpful because that tells you, or that defines, what's the job to be done. Where do we need to focus? What do we need to prioritize? And of course, I love every part of L&D. So I would say it'll be amazing if you can see the end-to-end process of not only looking through what's needed, but then going through the process of designing something, delivering something, or seeing it being delivered, and then going back to the notice board, going back to the board where you tweak it to make sure that you got all the learnings and it works better a second time around.
Yeah, thank you for the answer. And we are coming to the final part of our podcast, which is devoted to the parallels between learning and development and marketing. So for those of you who are our followers of our podcast, you might know that we've had a podcast with Mike Taylor, who is specializing in this area, and we've covered briefly this topic as well. So please make sure to follow the QR code in case you have missed the episodes. But I'm extremely interested in your insights because you've transitioned within one organization from marketing to L&D. So how do you, from where you stand right now, what advice could you firstly give to L&D professionals about integrating marketing techniques into learning experiences? And what parallels do you see between these two fields? What can we learn from each other?
Sure, it's a great question, and I think there are some remarkable parallels. Firstly, to your first question, what can L&D professionals learn from marketing? I would say one of the most used terms in marketing is consumer centricity or consumer intimacy. And the same applies to L&D. Think end user first, think learner first. And what are the different learning personas and how to cater for them? That's something that marketers do really well. I've done it for many, many years for many brands with some great teams. And I think the same thing needs to be applied to which function, which learner persona you are designing for. The second one, which I feel there's a gap today, is, and again, we can learn from the world of marketing, is how to design learning in the flow of work. And what I mean by that is, how can you integrate learning into the typical day of a salesperson or a typical day of a marketer or whoever you're designing for, and not the other way around? Because we must realize that these are busy people with busy jobs, and we can't expect them to give up everything for a day or two or more and just be focused. So rather than complaining that people are distracted, we need to create spaces for them to continue with the jobs, yet design something that flows seamlessly into their day and in the flow of their work. And the third thing that I would say L&D people can learn from marketers is this whole thing about try before you buy. A lot of marketing services, marketing products do sampling, and they offer this opportunity. The same thing can be done in learning. Just pilot. Create space and time for yourself to pilot your workshops or pilot your learning interventions. Run some dummy sessions with anyone that you can find. You don't need to go live and then treat your first cohort of learners as guinea pigs. So I think to summarize, consumer centricity, how to design in the flow of work, and try before you buy through piloting. Those would be the three things that L&D professionals can learn from marketing. Maybe for your second question, what can marketers learn from L&D? That's super interesting. I've not given that a thought, but definitely there. If I was to ever go back to marketing now after this experience that I've had of L&D, perhaps the first thing that I would apply is, in marketing, we spend a lot of time watching trends, which way things are going, so we can capitalize on it, which ingredients are getting popular, so we use them in our products. The learning that we can get from L&D is how to be 2 steps ahead of the consumer. Because in L&D, we're always thinking ahead of the curve. We're trying to design for the future organization, and we're trying to shape the trends rather than simply wait for them. I think that's something marketers could learn. The other thing could be a lot of L&D professionals who do it right take a lot of pride in experiential learning. And again, marketers could learn a thing or two about how to make very intangible concepts more tangible and how to curate immersive experiences. I think some marketers already do it really well, but in L&D, the challenge is a lot higher because it's something abstract, and the few who do it right could be a lighting guide for so many more.
Thanks for the reply. And I have two comments at once. So it's very interesting that I remember that we had a wonderful episode with Rita Azevedo, who mentions that she calls the learner customer. So this is coming from your perspective as a marketer. I think that this approach changes a lot in terms of producing learning experiences. And secondly, regarding the learning in the flow for how do you manage to implement such a complex approach, because it's not that easy. We've got our own onboarding processes, and we are commonly tied to these long instruction manuals, and learning in the flow of work is one of the most challenging to implement. So is there anything that you could share, maybe some advice?
So I wouldn't say we are cutting edge. We're still learning. It's a constant process, but there are a few things we've done right. And I think start with prioritization. Be very clear who you're designing for and what are you designing for them, because there's so many things you can do and there can be so many right answers. So being very clear and sharp about the priorities. The other thing is what I mentioned at the start, which is measurement. Once you're clear on the priorities, how do you know what success looks like? A lot of the times it's not very clear, it's not very evident. It requires discussion, alignment, and then you really need all stakeholders on the same page where we say, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is how we will measure success. Once you've got these two things done, then of course it's about making sure that we understand who the end user is and no one solution will work. So it'll usually be a mixture of face-to-face learning, hybrid learning, bite-sized learning. But all of that has to come together in a way that it addresses the need and it helps the end user. And therefore, it has to be something that is not overwhelming. It's not something that you throw at them at once, but you give it to them in small sizes that are chewable. And then you show them progress. You give them the feeling that they are making one progress after another. And you also need to really show them how it helps their day job and it doesn't add to the day job. Because that's the first reaction of most learners. As soon as they get an invite, they feel, oh my goodness, that's half a day. That's 1 day of my week gone. That's 1/5 of my week. How do I deliver? And we just need to be, if it's salespeople, we need to ensure that we're not sending them such things in the last week of the month, because that's when they have to deliver their numbers. So just being very cognizant of who they are, what's happening in their lives, and how can we really help them. And sometimes simple conversations with these people will help right at the early stage of the process, rather than after you have already worked through all the details.
Thanks to Anser for sharing your insights and your story and inspiring so many of listeners and ours, me personally. And that's a wrap for another episode of Leap into L&D. We hope you enjoyed hearing about Anser Aly's journey and gain valuable insights into career transitions, skill building, and how marketing techniques can enhance learning experiences. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to subscribe, leave us a rating, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So you can follow us on LinkedIn and stay updated on upcoming episodes, exclusive content, and get to know about Eli, the AI platform empowering L&D professionals to create engaging, high-quality learning content with ease. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch up on the next episode. Thank you, Anser.
Thank you, Anna, and thanks, everyone.